Before Alan Osmond was a pop star, before the Donny and Marie show, before the Royal Command performances for Queen Elizabeth, before the 100 million records, he was a boy in Ogden, Utah, learning to harmonize. Not in a recording studio, in a home, with his brothers beside him, in a church. The music and the faith were never separate things for Alan Osmond. They were always the same thing expressed in two different registers. And so when the Suncrest Stake Center in Orem, Utah filled with family and friends on Saturday, May 2, 2026, the hymns that rose inside that building were not just musical selections for a funeral program. They were the autobiography of a man who spent 76 years believing that music was ministry, and ministry was music, and that the two could never be fully divided. Alan Ralph Osmond passed away peacefully at his home in Lehi, Utah on April 20, 2026, after a 40-year battle with multiple sclerosis. His wife Susan was beside him. All 8 of his sons were in the room. And on Saturday, 12 days after he left, his family opened the doors of that stake center and invited the world to say goodbye. Let's start with Donnie. Because in a family where music was the shared language, the language of the stage, of the studio, of 60 years of performance, it fell to the brother who carries the most famous voice in the Osmond family to help send Alan home with sound. Donny Osmond did not come to that service as a celebrity. He came as a younger brother who grew up with Alan's arm already around him, protecting him, guiding him, carrying the weight so that Donny could shine. He said so himself in the tribute he posted in the days after Alan's death, and in the music he helped arrange for the service. He was doing the only thing that a man who communicates most truthfully through song could do. He was saying thank you, in the only language they both fully understood. The hymns chosen for Alan Osmond's farewell were not chosen at random. They were the hymns of a man who served as a temple worker alongside his wife Susan for 15 years and described those years as the best of their lives, who assisted all 8 of his sons in earning their Eagle Scout awards, not because it was expected of him, but because he believed that faith without discipline was incomplete, who woke in the middle of the night to record lyrics on paper because the music inside him never stopped. For a man like that, the hymns are not background, they are testimony. Among the most beloved hymns of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is How Great Thou Art, a declaration that takes the grandeur of the natural world and turns it into worship. It is the hymn of someone who has looked at mountains and sunsets and stars and felt something too large for ordinary language. For a man who co-founded Stadium of Fire, who believed, without apology, that there was no such thing as too many fireworks, that sense of enormous, joyful, overflowing gratitude was completely natural. He was not a small man in his faith. He was not cautious or reserved about what he believed. He believed it fully, completely, and publicly, the way he did everything else in his life. Another hymn that runs like a thread through Latter-day Saint funerals is Abide With Me, the plea for God's presence in the darkest moments. For a man who battled MS for 40 years, who watched his body change and limit and slow, while his spirit refused to follow, who said, I may have MS, but MS does not have me, not as a performance of strength, but as a genuine, faith-grounded declaration of who was actually in charge. Abide With Me was written for exactly that person, for the one who is still standing when the easy path was to sit down, who is still moving forward when the diagnosis said otherwise, who is still writing music lyrics on paper in the middle of the night because the song inside him has not finished yet. And then there is the hymn that is perhaps the most quietly powerful of all in a service like this one. I Know That My Redeemer Lives, the testimony hymn, the one that asks not for comfort or beauty or grandeur but for certainty, for the specific, unshakable conviction that the story does not end in a Lehi home on April 20, that the man surrounded by his wife and his 8 sons was not ending, but continuing, in a different form, in a different room. That conviction was the foundation of everything Alan Osmond built. Every missionary his family sent out to Denmark, Chile, South Africa, Spain, Paraguay, Brazil, Georgia, California, Kansas, Colorado, Nicaragua, Japan, Ghana, Michigan, and beyond. Every Eagle Scout badge he helped his sons earn. Every temple session he attended with Susan for 15 years. Every message of hope he sent to the MS community. Every donation request he made at his own funeral to the missionary fund, so that more people could go out and do the work he spent his whole life believing in. He would most want to be remembered, his obituary said, for his testimony of Jesus Christ. Not the records, not the awards, his testimony. I know that my Redeemer lives was not just a hymn for Alan Osmond. It was the thesis statement of his entire life. But wait, let me ask you something. Have you ever sat in a room where music was doing something that words simply could not? Where the melody was carrying a weight that language would have collapsed under? Where the harmony between voices was itself the message, the proof that something larger than any individual was present in the room? That is what happened in the Suncrest Stake Center on May 2, not because the performers were famous, not because the arrangements were elaborate, but because the people singing those hymns had actually lived alongside Alan Osmond, had actually seen what he meant when he said that faith required more of him than he knew he had actually felt the specific warmth of being loved by a man who never stopped choosing to show up for his family, for his faith, for the music, no matter how much it cost him. When those voices joined together in that room, in the harmonies that Alan taught them from childhood, that he wrote into albums and television specials and stadium productions, they were not just performing, they were completing something. A circle that began in a humble Ogden home, where a boy learned to sing alongside his brothers to raise money for hearing aids, and ended in a Orem church where those same sounds came back to carry him home. Donnie wrote of his brother, "He was my protector, my guide, the one who quietly carried so much responsibility so the rest of us could shine." And in that church, the shining was for Alan. For once, the spotlight was entirely his. The harmonies were arranged around his memory. The hymns were chosen for his testimony. The room was full because of who he was, not as a producer, not as a patriarch, not as the eldest performing Osmond, but as a man who spent his whole life pointing toward something larger than himself. And the music in that room was the most honest tribute his family could offer, because music was always how they told each other what mattered most. 30 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren, 8 sons who all earned their Eagle Scout awards because their father sat beside them through every requirement. A wife who stood with him through 40 years of MS and called those final temple service years the best of their lives. That is the congregation that sang those hymns on Saturday, May 2, and that is the man they were singing home. Rest well, Alan. June 22, 1949, April 20, 2026. The harmony he started is still ringing. Thank you for watching.